Good afternoon, gentlemen. For the record, could you just state your names and the position you hold in your organization?
I'm Martino Tan. I'm the Managing Editor of Mothership.
Okay.
I'm Lin Wee King, Managing Director of Mothership.
Thank you. The evidence which you will be giving today before the committee will be taken on oath. If you so desire, you can take an affirmation. Clerk, please administer the oath.
Please take the Bible and hold it in your left hand, together with the oath slip. Now raise your right hand, and together please recite the oath. I, Martino Tan, swear that the evidence which I shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you, gentlemen. Please be seated. Welcome to the public hearing on the Select Committee on Deliberate Online Falsehoods. The focus for today's evidence gathering session is for us to put questions to you. You have taken a solemn obligation to answer our questions truthfully, and I will now call on Ms. Rahayu to raise the questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Tan and Mr. Lien. Thank you so much for waiting and for appearing before us to give your submissions. Mr. Tan, I understand that you are the Deputy Managing Director as well as the Managing Editor of Mothership. And Mr. Lien, you are the Managing Director of Mothership.
That is correct.
What I propose to do is actually to go through your submissions and maybe highlight the salient points. And at appropriate juncture, if you wish to elaborate, please do so. Perhaps I'll start with the background that you set about the importance of deliberate online falsehood and the importance of dealing with deliberate online falsehoods. At page 1 of your last paragraph, you actually described the media industry as being under siege, as technology has turned news and information into commodities that are tradable, low cost, and public. And you observe that open distribution of networks and access now bypass and significantly diminish the role of traditional media and journalists. Would that be right?
That's correct.
And further, you indicated at the last paragraph of page 1 and the first paragraph of page 2 that audiences are now increasingly unwilling to pay for content and that most news organizations experience continued declines in subscriptions, viewership, and readership.
That's correct.
And we heard a little bit about this earlier.
Yes.
You also said at paragraph 4 of page 2 that it is technology that drives the information superhighways, not people. And you also expressed the view that echo chambers arose as a result of computer codes failing to effectively and accurately consider human emotional complexity. That would be accurate?
That is correct.
At page 2 of paragraph 5, you observed that the operatives who deal in deliberate misinformation and falsehoods exploit the human bias to seek out information one agrees with, to create alternative realities to serve their own agenda. And I'm not sure if you've been following, because the other representatives who have come and appeared before us over the past week and the last few days have also made reference to the heuristic tendencies of confirmation bias and this illusory truth, all the backfire effect, and all these things that I suppose also adds on to the worry of the spread of deliberate online falsehoods. Would you agree?
Yes, we do.
You indicated at paragraph 6 that you believe that all media platforms in Singapore must protect and preserve the delicate social equilibrium that we have. And at paragraph 7, you added that you are of the view that matters relating to race and religion, national security, national identity, and social cohesion must never be subject to any attempts at deliberate falsehoods and misinformation, especially from foreigners. Would that be right?
That is right.
I'll move on to address some of the efforts that Mothership has taken to tackle online falsehoods. And so at page 2, you have explained in the last two paragraphs that deliberate online falsehoods have made it difficult to constantly maintain a strong relationship of trust, reliability, and credibility with your audiences. And you said that Mothership has a group of editors who carefully consider, edit for clarity, and fact-check articles before publishing and distributing it to Mothership's social platforms and live site. Would that be right? You also highlighted the specific section that Motherhood has that hosts articles debunking false stories from various sources online. Is that right?
Yes.
Perhaps you could share a little bit about the efforts that you've been making at page 3 on paragraphs 4 to 5 about the public forums and community efforts that you've put in place to address and combat this. Would you like to maybe summarize a little bit about the efforts that you've made?
Sure. I'd like to share that over the past year, we have also become a victim of fake news. We have made mistakes. I think in the month of August, where we have published an article that was erroneous about potential presidential candidate Salim Marikan. And a week later, we also had an erroneous article on the Ministry of Education. And so following that, Mothership has gone through our own internal checks as well to see how we can do things better, how can we improve. And we have created our own internal SOP, increase our internal checks, including having two lines of editors to double check our articles and our content that's being published online. So that's part of our efforts. And following that, because we realized that this is not sufficient, we have started being more vigilant against deliberate online falsehood. And we have created, in our own small way, our efforts, created a column, a section related to, I would say, deliberate online falsehood to combat those misinformation. And over the past 6 months, some examples of the articles include helping our readers understand that President Halimah Yacob did not have a Twitter account, helping to clarify the fact that Minister Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan did not suffer from any heart attack in New York. So things like that, with our limited resources, we try our best to help relay the correct information as soon as possible.
Thank you so much for your candor and the responsible action that you've been taking so far. And I think you have highlighted the fact that you've been making all these efforts to try and combat falsehoods, as well as also, I suppose, reach out and educate people about this disinformation. But having said that, there are still some difficulties, and you also developed further in your submission about the need to put in further measures, in particular in respect of legislation. Maybe perhaps I'll just set out the landscape that you've also mentioned in your article, in your submission. At page 5, paragraphs 1 to 2, you also said that legislation and policy measures should focus on challenges posed by technology and tech companies. And you made this suggestion because tech companies, quote, possess massive broadcasting influence and ability, neither of which currently come under the jurisdiction of any existing media-related legislation. And also you mentioned at page 4, paragraph 1, that there were other players who could perpetuate and create online falsehoods. And these players cannot be ignored or dismissed, you say, because these are people who are, doing this spreading information in WhatsApp chats or individual influencers. So would it be fair to say that you actually agree that legislation is needed to tackle deliberate online falsehoods?
Mr. Chairman, the truth is that we are quite conflicted on this matter ourselves. While we understand why you may believe, or some may believe, that it is necessary for more legislation on this front, and especially with matters pertaining to race and religion, to national social cohesion and our national security. And to these concerns, right, we understand and we agree with that these must be reviewed. I think we are also concerned, right, that what would more legislation bring about? We have stated in our submission, right, that the media industry is already languishing, not just in Singapore, but in the world. The truth is that the duopoly of Google, Facebook in the last 15 years have more or less succeeded in conditioning audiences and media companies to be almost entirely dependent on their platforms to search, to consume, and even to publish information. So inadvertently or otherwise, it has created the two biggest digital intermediaries the world has ever known. And contrary to what our colleague from SPH suggested, it is actually Facebook and Google that is mopping up majority of the global advertising revenues and not smaller sites like ours. Yeah. Secondly, right, we have also observed in matters pertaining to creativity, sometimes imposing too many rules or limits or prescriptions would affect or drain the creative spirit. Thirdly, it is our view that there exists a perceived public bias against local MSM, mainstream media, that they are less able to operate independently due to their unique relationship with the government. And of course, if we are wrong, we stand corrected. But if that were the case, we are concerned that Singaporeans may lose even more trust in the local media and local publishers if they assume that local operators like us are simply not as free or as independent due to more regulation or more legislation. And then in this case, right, what would stop them from turning to overseas media companies for information about Singapore? Because they may believe that these overseas media companies will report about Singapore more objectively and more independently. So I suppose in the pre-digital age, right, you could have restricted foreign publications' readership by restricting their circulation. But in this network world, how are we going to do that? I'm not sure. Fourth, and finally, the reason why we are a bit concerned is there is this, we're concerned that if there are too many rules, which is imposed on what you have referred to as the open market of ideas, would this then cause a black market of ideas to arise? We believe it is a great social asset for Singapore if our local social media and our media is trusted. So how do we regulate with a light touch? Preferably indirectly, so that social media can also be trusted. We feel that we should not drive more Singaporeans into the darker parts of the internet, especially narrowcasting, where it's really difficult to regulate or monitor. If it is indeed decided, right, that we do need more regulation or more legislation, right, the question is what kind? I think the Chinese president said recently that cyberspace development is a part of national development and not apart from it. So I suppose we should agree that there should be more legislation, but I think we should be mindful of the unintended consequences. So as the Chinese very succinctly put it, if we hold the bird too tight, it suffocates. If we hold it too loose, it flies away.
Thank you so much for elaborating on the position that you've set out in your submissions. I think we do note that you have raised very strong concerns about any legislation potentially impacting on the flow of ideas and creativity. And I think we are all in sync with that in as far as that we want to ensure there is a thriving space for discussion in Singapore. But I think you also acknowledge, and I appreciate the nuanced approach to it, that there is a need to regulate with what you say is a light touch, and that's something I suppose we're all trying to arrive at. But I also would like to highlight, you also put it in your paper about how it's necessary to customize, I suppose, the approach, because there may be other ways everywhere else overseas. But in Singapore, we have certain concerns, we have certain priorities, and that's something that we need to really focus on. In this regard, can I just get that clarification that you do acknowledge and accept that we need to regulate the tech companies and certain other players because there are certain existing gaps? Because you did say that there's applicable legislation that already exists, but in light of explanation given by the Professor Goh Yi Han as well as Professor Teo Lian earlier today, would you accept that there are gaps and that there's certain legislation that needs to be placed to close these gaps?
Yes, I believe that the legislation needs to be updated. From our own perspective, as an online site, we are already regulated under the class license, and of course there is the Newspaper Printing Presses Act and the Broadcasting Act. However, in terms of reacting or adapting to technological changes, perhaps there isn't anything that's as clear. So we can see that there is a need for an update as well to manage certain challenges on that area.
Thank you very much. Maybe I just want to zoom in on one of the concerns you seem to have highlighted in your paper at paragraph, page 4, last 2 paragraphs on the takedown measures. You voiced some concerns. I think broadly, I just want to understand that you appreciate the need for some urgency in as far as deliberate online falsehoods. And, this is something that we've, debated, but the point is it's deliberate online falsehoods, the seriousness of it and the damage it can cause if it's not immediately attended to. So I just wanted to see your clarification, because you did give an example, but broadly, that concept of the takedown notice, right? Because I would just highlight that Professor Goh Yi Han had also suggested that any legislation include not just takedown provisions, but provisions for clarification or an apology, and building on this, if the law required that the correction or clarification be placed alongside the falsehood instead, wouldn't you agree that this would still be satisfactory and it would keep alive the opportunity to build critical thinking around information, as you have said in your representation?
Yes, using the example that we have highlighted, because there's of course two options. One is to edit the article to make clarifications, and then the second option, of course, is perhaps a nuclear option of removing the article. And this is where sometimes as practitioners we have an issue, because it depends on how one would define. I think the key issue is the word intent. And from the example that we cited, we felt that there wasn't any malicious intent. So if I understand correctly, I think in terms of the definition of the hearing as well, if it's deliberate online falsehood, if the intent is clear, I think we can agree. What I felt from our example that we highlighted, perhaps the intent wasn't as clear. So there was a difference in interpretation of what fake news is, even among the two ministries. Yeah.
Understand. I suppose the other element of this is also the fact that, again, going back to the suggestion Professor Goh Yi Han had made, was that the appropriate approach towards deliberate online falsehoods could be a quick executive action first, and then with independent judicial oversight. So in that sense, it would prevent any legislation from being abused. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. You've also kindly shared some considerations with regards to the social media and large tech companies. You addressed a little bit of this earlier, but I just wanted to summarize that section in your submission. At page 5, paragraph 4, you said that Facebook and Google has massively amplified deliberate online falsehoods through crawlers and algorithms that fail to discern fact from fiction, while hiding behind the argument that they are mere platforms for information. And at paragraphs 6 to 8, you suggested that tech companies review the way their systems work in close partnership with regulators, the media, and the local community to develop solutions and offerings better suited for the country, culture, and society in question. And in the end, you also urged that tech companies place a renewed focus on accountability. And you said that one way that this can be done is through the speedy identification and removal of fake or identity impersonating Facebook accounts, which we heard that they've already been doing. But basically, for them to take ownership, take responsibility, and be more accountable in the things that they do. Would that be an accurate summary of your submission?
Yes, that would be accurate, and I would like to elaborate a little bit. So, our understanding is that the social media platform, the American technology companies, see themselves more as a platform, while for a small site like ours, a team of just 30, we see ourselves more as a pro-Singapore and pro-Singaporean site. So we believe that our objective is to help our readers in Singapore be informed, to be entertained. So we have a duty and an obligation to do that. We don't have that much resources, but we are trying our best, and we believe that very competent companies like Facebook and Google can do more.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
You say that you're not such a giant, but your submission tells us that you've got 1.9 million visitors in Singapore visit and interact with us every month, and this number continues to grow. That's quite a sizable following. You agree?
It's subjective, Mr. Tong, I suppose, yes.
But it's something that obviously, while it's subjective, I would say that it is not something to be ignored.
I agree with that, yes.
So you also mentioned throughout your submission that there is a responsibility that you carry. And I think as the leaders of Mothership, you will look at this responsibility very carefully. Would you agree?
Yes, we do.
And at page 2 of your submission, you do make the point, I think that Ms. Rahayu took you through it, but you do make the point that you are clear in your position that matters relating to the following concerns should never be subject to any attempt at deliberate falsehoods and misinformation. And I think those are all issues which concern our unique Singaporean position on race, racial divides, cultural divides, social cohesion. And in your view, as the leaders at Mothership, you take on the responsibility to ensure that matters of this nature never be purveyed falsely to influence or undermine that cohesion, must be taken very seriously.
Yes.
You agree?
We agree.
Yes. So we all would accept, I think, that there is really no place for deliberate online falsehoods anywhere on the internet or anywhere else. Correct?
Yes, we do.
And would you agree with me that it's not just a question of these issues, race, religion, and so on, which of course is more heightened, but at the end of the day, there should just be no deliberate online falsehoods being purveyed, as in an ideal world, obviously. Correct?
Correct.
Yes, correct.
And therefore, it must stand to reason that everything possible that can be done to remove deliberate online falsehoods should be done. Right?
Yes.
Yes. And we all have heard evidence from several experts, both local and international, who have told us that falsehoods travel faster than truths. I think as media, I think you probably have that experience as well.
Yes.
Would you say that's true? Yes. You've got to articulate it so they can pick it up.
Okay.
And would you also accept the position that we've been told that it sometimes is very hard to correct the misimpression the moment the falsehood is out there?
Yes.
Yes? You yourselves, I think, mentioned that you carry on your website some section which tries to curb the falsehood. In fact, you try to correct some information which you might perceive as being false or misleading, and you try and set the record straight. That's something that you would do on your website.
Yes, we
Yes.
do.
So I take it from there that from Mothership's perspective, you would also value, or rather value the removal or curbing of deliberate online falsehoods as much as possible. And you would play a part in making sure that is done.
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
it will be applied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at that as the background, and I heard Mr. Lian articulate about 4 or 5 points earlier about including several things, including legislation and about not squeezing the bird too tightly and so on. I think you make the same point at page 3 at the bottom, where I think your concern is articulated as not wanting to impact the flow of ideas and creativity, right?
That is right.
Would you accept that if we all agree that there is just no place for deliberate online falsehoods anywhere on the internet, then the removal of such falsehoods would in fact create more space for that creativity, that vibrancy in authorship, and would improve the overall situation, right?
Yes.
Right? So if you take that proposition together with the fact that one has to quickly remove falsehoods because they travel faster, and quickly put out the truth, as you have tried to do on your website, because they correct the misimpression, I think a combination of being able to have the ability through legislation or otherwise to remove falsehoods, put out the truth, as well as then create the space for creativity would be what we would regard as an ideal situation.
Yes.
Yes? And so we should do what we can to get ourselves as far as possible to that situation. Correct?
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that we, of course, take the hammer and kill off every small item. It has got to be differentiated, I think, the response. And in some cases, media literacy would be useful, perhaps in the longer term, to make sure that your audience is more discerning. In other cases, you need to move with speed. Would you agree?
Yes.
So the regime that we want to end up with must have the range of remedies available, as well as the spectrum of options available to deal with the differentiated types of online falsehoods. Sometimes they are falsehoods, sometimes they are misimpressions, sometimes they are inadvertent, but you must have the range of remedies available to deal with each of them, and in some cases, very quickly as well. Would you accept?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's been very helpful. No further questions from me. Thank you.
Dr. Janil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, some of the comments that you've put on record in your submission as well as today in person, you speak to the idea that more flow, more ideas, more expression will contribute to the strength of this marketplace of ideas and how that informs truth. I'm not sure if you heard or sat in for some of the conversations we've had earlier today about the marketplace of ideas with Professor Teo Lian and Mr. Gaurav Kirti. But would you agree with the proposition that social media as a proxy for the marketplace of ideas today does not function well?
Dr. Janil, I believe there are gaps.
Okay.
And I think you have also referred to, I forget the exact words you use, but an all-encompassing approach to deal with the ecosystem.
A holistic, multifaceted
all right,
approach.
yes. Multifaceted, that's right, yeah. So on that, I think we are in agreement.
Yes.
We see that there are gaps.
Yes.
We hope that the social media companies can work closer with governments.
Yes. No, Mr. Lian, we agree on this. I'm not trying to pick holes in that part of the argument.
Sure, okay.
But I just want to focus specifically on the issue of is there a functioning marketplace of ideas in the social media space today?
I think it can be improved because social media appeals to, I think like what you mentioned, appeals to the biasness of the users as well. So it's not perfect, and
Okay.
it can be done better.
So the use of social media as a proxy for the concept of marketplace ideas today is flawed. It's not perfect. I'm not saying it's completely inappropriate or impossible, but it's not entirely functioning as we would hope for some of the reasons that you've articulated. You'd agree with that, right?
Yes.
Bias you've talked about, an excess of information that you have mentioned in your submission as well. the inability of the readership, the audience, to actually discern truth from falsity sometimes, as you confirm people's biases. The exploitation of the platform for the purposes of advertising and monetization to target specific consumers. All these undermine the marketplace of ideas. And similarly, people who act with some degree of malfeasance and mischief to exploit that space, ideologues that Dr. Tullian spoke about, deliberately misleading actors that she spoke about, as well as irrational people. All of these behaviors will undermine the ability for that marketplace of ideas to function to the point where just simply having more ideas and more commentary will automatically be a good, be a benefit. Would you agree with that proposition? That we need to fix the process so that further creativity, further ideas, and further expressions can be better for us, whereas absent fixing it, we may not be dealing with the problem. If you agree that the marketplace of ideas today is flawed, surely before we add more ideas to that marketplace, we need to fix the marketplace first.
I think we should try our best to fix this very flawed marketplace of ideas. I guess we are just not sure whether we are able to do so completely. So,
no, I understand.
Yeah.
But you agree that the marketplace of ideas is flawed, it needs fixing, before further contributions to that marketplace can work to reinforce the original conception of what that marketplace of ideas we hope will do.
we can agree, yeah.
Okay. So would it be fair to say then that you agree with the idea that more information on its own is not sufficient? That actually what we need is more credible and accurate information in a functioning marketplace of ideas. You need both of those phrases to be complete and sufficiently dealt with in order for our aims to be addressed.
We cannot disagree with that.
And so that doesn't preclude the possibility that legislation is necessary in order to achieve those aims.
No, not at all. Just now, Wee King mentioned that he was conflicted, right? So I guess for us, the key thing, of course, is how we define the legislation. I think we don't disagree with the need for legislation, but how tightly it's being defined in terms of deliberate online falsehood. So that's our concern there.
I hope you'll appreciate that all the members of the committee and what we've said in person as well as what we've put down in paper, we are quite concerned that any legislation, if it occurs, needs to be very carefully written, very specifically scoped, and operationalized in a very deliberate way, so that the end result is an increase of trust in discourse and discussion, because that will be to benefit of all of us. I hope we can agree on that.
Yes, fully.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I realize I may not have been clear in some of my points, so I just wanted to come back to a few with you. The first is this question of online falsehoods. I think we agreed earlier that there is no place for it, deliberate online falsehoods, and we should do what we can to eradicate this,
Yes.
right? So whether we use legislation or a suite of or a combination of other measures, that is the end game, to remove online falsehoods, correct?
Yes.
So if one was publishing something that is true, there should be no concern,
Yes.
right? And there should also be no fear or concern that there is any degree of censorship or removal of creativity, or using the words you have used in your submission, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Because as I think we agreed earlier, if you remove falsehoods, you might actually promote more creativity with truth.
Yes, we can.
Would you agree? I think earlier, in response to Ms. Rahayu's questions, I can't find my notes on that now, but I think you mentioned that the level of trust on the mainstream media is not high. Do you recall that?
I spoke about a perceived bias, a perceived view.
Perceived bias,
Yeah.
okay.
That we feel that
Okay.
the public has towards mainstream media, yes.
Would you accept that the Edelman publication actually ranks our mainstream media much higher than others.
I accept that they have published their findings, yes. I mean,
Which ranks our mainstream media higher than the mainstream media of many other countries.
yes.
Yes. And we heard CNA and ST come earlier and say that, you know, when there is, of course, lots of people go to other sites, including yours. But what they tell us is that when there is a significant event, when there's something that's particularly newsworthy, they see a significant spike in the number of clicks onto their own website, which they say suggests that at the end of the day, the mainstream media is still trusted for serious news. Would you disagree with that?
No, we don't. But we also, I believe, see a spike on our own site
Yes.
during major events, major national events.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you see a corresponding spike as well on your site?
Yes, during
That's
the
right,
general
yes.
elections.
In fact,
yes.
I think not just our site, but the entire social media space in general, I think it buzzes when there are national events or big events or extraordinary events that occur.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the suite of options as countermeasures
Yeah.
to deal with this, legislation being something that we spoke about, would you agree that in the context of what we've just been discussing, legislation to remove online falsehoods would not affect free speech?
It would not, but of course, the key question is how sharp or how fine the legislation is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you see, earlier on we heard evidence from Professor Teo Lian from NUS, and she said that, quoting several cases and some learning, that there is no public interest in purveying false information, and free speech must have at least those limits. Would you agree?
Fully agree.
Right. So if you define legislation to remove false information, then it really doesn't impact for free speech. Correct?
Correct.
You would agree.
I would.
So legislation would therefore be a useful tool in dealing with online falsehoods, because really that's the only way you can have effective countermeasure against material that travels faster than truth.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Tong, may I also add on that our concern that there are people who are perhaps on certain subject matters that they feel more educated or more informed about, or they may be domain experts. But there are many others who may only have a view of a certain subject matter. Yeah, and if the legislation is too blunt, too strong, too hard-handed, I wonder if it might create I won't call it a climate of fear, but perhaps it will make people more mindful about actively participating in the public discourse. They may have a view, but because of this legislation, they may be less willing to share that view, for better or worse. Yeah.
But if the objective of the legislation is to remove falsehoods, and we've discussed that and your views on this earlier, then no one wants to have let me rephrase that. No one is saying that you can not articulate your views, because as long as you keep to within what is not deliberate online falsehoods, there's nothing to fear, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe I'd like to add on as well. It also very much depends on which actors are using the legislation, implementing the legislation. So from our experience as an online site, when we were asked by IMDA to be part of the class license, I think from our experience you can see in terms of the track record, how IMDA has adopted a light touch approach, and that helps, I think, us get a good sense of the legislation. And if I were to use another example, POHA, right? We have gotten, I think, even for us, 2 to 3 POHAs against Mothership. So it really very much depends on who are the actors. Some if it's perhaps from of national security concern, and is being used by the government. I expect the government to be very prudent with the approach. But I've also seen how POHA is being used by other actors as well, and sometimes I'm not quite sure if they are as careful and prudent.
Right, but we're talking about putting out falsehoods, deliberately lying, and conveying lies. Now, there can be no room for that whatsoever. You agree?
Yes, I think we've stated
Right,
that really
I think we
Yes.
totally agree on this, right?
Yes.
Yes. So if that is the object of the legislation and the intent, then I think one has to be entirely supportive of that, correct?
Yes, we are, but again, I have to say that we need to see the nature of the legislation. Yeah.
So what you're saying really is you would support the fact that you must have legislation against deliberate falsehoods, lying, putting out lies. But
Yes.
the question becomes how we then draft it, how we then differentiate it in the way we have discussed earlier.
That is absolutely
Yes.
right.
Right.
Yes.
But I think the fundamental objective of having legislation tackle and effectively tackle robustly online falsehoods, you have no disagreement with.
We do not. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just build on one point that Mr. Tong brought up, just very briefly? Can I ask, you talked about becoming a class licensee, that Mothership came under the ambit of those regulations just a minute ago. So there was a time when you were not covered by those regulations and the legislation, and there was a time that you are now covered by that legislation.
Yes, that is correct.
Did your traffic go up as a result of coming under that legislation or go down?
Our traffic grew gradually.
But during the time that you became covered
There
by
was no significant spike.
was there a drop?
No, there wasn't.
Was there a drop in contributions and commentary and engagement on your platform as a result of becoming covered by legislation?
No.
Thank you very much.
Desmond?
Mr. Lian and Mr. Tan, just a couple of questions. The top of page 3 of your submission, I thought I could ask you to elucidate. I quote, "One of our efforts in this regard, for instance, is a section on our site that specifically hosts articles debunking false stories from various sources online," unquote. Could I ask you, and if you can respond, have you compared the consumption, the reach, or the virality of the false stories that you have sought to debunk on, as you quote, various sources online, unquote, versus the consumption, reach, and virality of the articles on your site, this particular section, that seek to debunk those falsehoods? Are you able to give us a sense generally?
I think in terms of the virality of the falsehood, online, we are unable to do so. But from our own experience, if the debunking is done so with speed, there are, I think, a lot of readers out there who are interested for us to contextualize issues as well. So if it's done with speed, I think the article tends to be read by more people. If, for instance, if the falsehood is already circulating longer, for a day or so, if you have an article like that, you will not be able to, I think, reach as many of our readers.
So you say late means 1 or 2 days later,
1 or 2 days.
that kind of time span.
Yeah.
Can I also ask you, because at page 6, bottom of page 5, and the rest of page 6, putting accountability front and center, and reading your submission, these couple of paragraphs, bottom of page 5, top of page 6, are essentially your kind of a positive contribution to a range of ideas of how we can tackle DOF. And you give a broad idea, and then you give a specific idea. Your broad idea is that you hope that tech companies will double up their efforts in relation to being accountable front and center, right, and place renewed focus on accountability. And your specific example of that would be for large tech companies or social media companies like Facebook to speedily identify and remove fake or identity impersonating accounts, and also to develop technologies to ensure that only one person use one account each as far as possible, and ensure that the account is linked to a named person and not an avatar or bot. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We heard the tech companies yesterday, and you might have been following it in the media or on site. These companies started out not too long ago as small companies, as startups, perhaps with, I'm guessing, 1.9 million people, and now it's 2 billion in case of Facebook. And you would have heard them articulate yesterday the broad approach in which they take, which is not to tackle online falsehood at source, whether it's true or false, but rather to use machine learning, artificial intelligence, algorithms, their own bots, to try to find proxies that indicate potential falsehoods. So if it's a low-quality site, there are lots of clickbait, or it behaves in a particular way, it is likely to be malicious and more likely to purvey falsehoods, without necessarily looking at whether it is a site that purveys falsehoods or a site that puts out the truth, and they will take it down just based on those proxies. Do you follow that?
We follow
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Whereas I contrast it with your approach, perhaps I might just say without any disrespect, an SME approach. At bottom of page 4, I'm sorry, you refer to the fact that you have a team of editors to look at and ensure that what you put out is accurate. Can you just give us a sense, contrasting the approach of large social media companies like Facebook and Google,
Okay.
and their use of automation to try to tackle falsehoods in an indirect way, versus the approach of a company like Mothership?
Okay. I'd like to state for the onset, right, that we are huge supporters of big tech companies, and a project like Mothership would not have been conceived or would not be able to survive without Facebook, without Google. Yeah. But we also recognize, right, that there are flaws in their operating models. It is the tech companies are shaping, building, driving this information superhighway, as I've described this. But it is us, human beings, right, that are populating this highway. Now the problem is that computerized or algorithms or programs, they are created to extract economies of scale and also help these companies maximize profits. And in a way, they are binary. Yeah. So while the computer is smart, right, it is still not smart enough to capture the full complexity of the human spirit. Technology may, at this moment, understand and capture human preferences, but technology does not understand human emotions such as love, anger, fear, envy, malice. So I think that's the problem. Yeah. Until technology is able to decipher that, I think we will continue to, I suppose, face certain limitations where these algorithms are concerned. Yeah. So we, in terms of our own processes, yes, we take an SME approach. We rely on judgment to I suppose, insert our own editorial position on certain content. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. You would have heard yesterday also that the tech companies have a different approach in their view for deliberate online falsehoods, where they recommend that rather than legislation, that the companies be allowed to self-regulate and put in measures to tackle DOF on their own, together with media literacy efforts on the ground. But they have a different approach and different policy when it comes to hate speech,
Yes.
when it comes to radical ideologies online, when it comes to counterterrorism. Their policy is to identify, and if it breaches the policy, they will take it down. by assessing the content.
Yes.
So when it comes to DOF, they will not assess the content. When it comes to what is perceived as hate speech, child pedophilia, and radical ideology, they will look at the content and take it down.
Yes.
And these are the large tech companies that, as you say, drive the information superhighway in the world. Do you have any comment on this kind of approach or bifurcation of approach?
Okay. I cannot speak about Google, but as I understand with regards to how Facebook does it, it still relies pretty much on the community to flag these hate speeches or these acts of cruelty or pornography. They still rely pretty much on the community to flag this up. Yeah. I'm not sure whether their programs or their algorithms are clever enough at this moment to detect this on their own. Yeah.
I believe our SME approach, right? I think we have to be a lot more proactive in handling online falsehood. And 4.5 years ago, when Mothership first started, we were a team of just four people and continue to grow. So the key thing lies with the careful, I think, selection and recruitment of our writers and editors who continue to subscribe to our first principles of being pro-Singapore and pro-Singaporean, and I think that's important. And even in terms of managing our website, our Facebook page, there needs to be someone who is out there who has the responsibility to help manage things that are perhaps deemed as false. So we have our editors who actively manage the comments on our own page as well.
Just one last question. Your submission and your oral testimony today, you talked about some of these social media companies, the giants, as being the highways, might add words into your mouth, public highways of information, or superhighways of information.
That's right.
That impact people, that impact societies, that impact governments around the world. Over the last week and the last few days, people have talked about the national security risks, the social risks, the risk to social cohesion, and the real physical harm that can be caused if DOFs are allowed to pervade through these superhighways of information. These superhighways of information, as you pointed out, are run by private corporations, publicly listed, yes, but they're private companies, profit-driven. But the activities that go through their sites, the kind of information that is generated through their algorithms for people to view and to consume, has those potential implications, dire, serious implications if brought to the extreme. Pages 5 and 6 of your submission talk about the need for more accountability. What, in your view, is your sense of whether these large tech companies are so-called rising to the occasion? Is what they're doing on track? Is it sufficient in light of the risks that can be posed if DOFs are driven through the superhighways that they've built and manage?
I think we wouldn't be here if we thought that they were operating in a sufficiently responsible or manner with regards to their role as a content platform, as a social media. We believe that these companies are very, very powerful, and they cannot pretend not to be. Yeah. And as such, we believe, we believe that they certainly have to do more on this front. And we have stated that it is our view, right, that they should work closer with the host countries, governments, in the marketplaces that they are operating within. Yeah, to perhaps come up with some kind of a localized solution. Yeah, because each country, each society has its own unique social dimension, social compact. Yeah. So I think having this universal model and bringing it in to one marketplace, especially a marketplace as small, as permeable as Singapore, I think that may not be the best way forward. Yeah. So we hope that they would be a little more open to working with the government on this front. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Tong.
I'm sorry, but it's me again.
Hi.
Just to pick up on some points that you raised with Minister earlier
Sure.
on the tech companies, and I wanted to get your views on them. To do that, I'd like to show you what was shown to Facebook, Google, and Twitter yesterday, then ask you some questions for your response to what these tech companies have been doing and maybe what we should be doing with these tech companies. I'll start with some summaries of information that were given to them, which deal with impact of DOFs, how they're absorbed by people, and the impact it has on national security. So if we have the tables, can we put them up, beginning with the table on the impact of DOFs? Yes, so this is information that's been summarized from preceding witnesses who've come before the Select Committee. So if you look at the proposition, the way this table is organized, the proposition, then the expert or the witness who's come forward to give that proposition, and then the references to the oral transcripts by way of reference. So this information campaigns can have real-world consequences and can influence events in real time. I think you would agree. They aim to weaken, destabilize, target societies. If you look over the page, in Europe, partly because of disinformation campaigns against migrants, it's become difficult to debate migration issues. There's a Czech Republic example of the Czech population. Over the page, disinformation can cause serious violence. I think this is on page 3, yes, with an example that's been given. Trust in institutions can be quickly eroded through deliberate online falsehoods. I think you would agree with that as well. Over the page, trust in police can also be eroded very quickly. And there have been some examples that previous witnesses have given us. The spreading of misinformation corrodes democracy. Healthy public debate is then affected. Some examples of that. You know the story of Ahok and what happened in Indonesia. Also in the 2012 and 2014 elections in Indonesia. Deliberate online falsehoods also seek to entrench existing views. So, for instance, in the German refugee debate, there have been some attempts to manipulate and create a negative trend against the migrants. And people are then pushed to the extreme. That's the view of Dr. Carol Soon, who I think you're familiar with. And then the second series of summaries set out how people then process and absorb this information that is put out there. And again, I'll quickly take you through it as well. If you just look on the screen, yes, people use mental shortcuts to process information. I think that's the heuristic question that's come up time and again. And a number of mental shortcuts that have been shown to be used would be the confirmation bias, where people accept information without checking as long as it fits with their pre-existing, preconceived beliefs. Then they accept it. There's also the motivated reasoning, where people look for information that fits with their existing beliefs. And in that regard, it is then easier to accept falsehoods that affirm their racial, religious, political, or community identities. There's also the illusory truth effect, where repeatedly hearing the same falsehood makes people believe that it is true. There's the negativity bias, where DOFs seem to evoke strong negative emotions in people and can leave stronger impressions on individuals. The conformity cascade, where in close-knit groups people agree with their peers so that they're not seen to be isolated. Informational cascades. Optimism biasness, where we overestimate our ability to detect falsehoods. So that's a question of discernment and media literacy as well. The truth is weak and does not travel as easily as falsehoods. We discussed that earlier. And Finally, the impact that this has on national security in the last table. We've been told by several witnesses that there's been a prevalence of disinformation campaigns throughout the world, essentially seeking to threaten and undermine national sovereignty, national security. It's also part of a military arsenal in some cases. Sometimes it takes place even in the absence of open conflict. It's also an attractive option because the cost and manpower required in doing it is relatively low, and we've heard evidence on how bot farms are created, clickbaits are created. They're highly effective. They also reduce the need to actually deploy military power. If the agenda is to undermine national security, national identity, then deploying this is low cost, low manpower, and you don't even need to deploy military might. They carry the lower cost of detection, where it can be subtle, obscure. People who use it, of course, in this area of national interest could be state actors, but we've also been told that non-state actors also use it, and sometimes it is used by state actors but shared by non-state actors domestically. There is a serious impact of disinformation campaigns throughout the world. We've heard from Dr. Michael Raska in particular, where they can influence real-time, real-world consequences. They aim to weaken, destabilize societies, reducing the will to work. They sow discord, they destroy trust, they weaken the fundamental fabric of society. They also target the link between government and key institutions, like the police, religious institutions, and so on. And we've heard some examples, striking examples of what happened in Texas on the US election from Dr. Shashi Jayakumar. On Pizzagate, I think you'll be familiar with that. We heard from Dr. Ben Nemo. And applying that closer to home in Singapore, where Singapore can be a sandbox for subversion, and it would be a mistake to assume that these attacks are not already happening. The source and drivers for such information warfare are deeply embedded in our regional security conflicts, and we ourselves are a target for it. And the means and tools are readily available. Dr. Jayakumar, in fact, said it would be a mistake to assume that it is not already happening. So broadly, what I've done is taken you through the evidence of what's happened in the past week or so from several witnesses who's given us this complex or this context of DOFs online. Now, we've heard your evidence earlier and also seen your submission that the information superhighway, or the duopoly, as Mr. Lian calls it, of Google and Facebook, or Twitter and Facebook, I can't recall, they would be the first port of call for news for many people, right? Correct? Yes. So one would have to be very mindful of what responsibilities they accept upon themselves and what powers there would be to deal with online falsehoods carried on their websites. Would you agree?
Yes.
We agree.
And I think you've also taken a very strong view that issues of national security, racial, religious, cultural divides tend to be exploited for broader interests. They undermine national security interests. And those are, I think, in your submission, obvious OB markers. Correct?
Yes.
I just want to show you one cartoon that was put on Twitter, but not removed for a number of reasons. I'll just show it to you first and ask you some questions. This is a graphic cartoon, obviously depicting a group of male ethnic minority migrants tying up, abusing a semi-naked white woman, stabbing her baby to death. Very graphic, and I think one that stirs very emotive feelings, designed to depict racial, cultural, I think very basic social cohesion issues would arise. Twitter didn't remove it from their site because it's not a breach, they say, of their hateful conduct policy. Would you agree with that?
On this case, no, we don't agree with Twitter.
If we had this come into Singapore on one of the websites, would you agree that there should be powers to have this removed?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I had. Now, I promise I won't come back again.
Okay, as there are no more questions, I would like to thank you, Mr. Lian, Mr. Tan, for taking time and sharing your views with us. I think it's very useful for us. Okay, thank you once again for being here. Okay, I propose to take a break until 3 o'clock, and we'll resume proceedings until at 3 o'clock. Thank you.